Today we're making a rotisserie chicken, assembly focused chicken soup. I guess I said chicken a couple times in there. But the focus is on quick cleanup, quick recipe. I don't anticipate that you could actually do this in only 15 minutes. You know, it takes a little time for the water to boil and things to chop and be pulled out of the fridge. But hopefully, especially after you've made it once or twice, or maybe five times, depending on um, where you're at and everything. Hopefully, you could be eating in like 20 minutes. That would be my goal. So, we're going to start. Well, tip number one is begin with the end in mind. So, I don't know if you can see, but I am using a cutting board that can go into the dishwasher. I'm not using my lovely like Wusthof knife that is a hand wash item for myself. I'm going to use, either a steak knife or a serrated knife because this is a dishwasher item at my house. Or maybe I'll use, my kitchen scissors, my poultry shears. I'm also leaning heavily on staples from my kitchen, things that are easy to have on hand, regardless of whether I'm planned ahead or not, excluding, of course, the rotisserie chicken. Um, and I'm going to use pots that also can go into the dishwasher. So certainly not my cast iron pots. I'm going to use my pot that can go into the dishwasher. All right, that out of the way. I'm going to start with the thing that takes the longest first, which is getting the broth up to speed, getting that warm, because then I'm going to throw in the cold rotisserie chicken and I'm going to throw in my frozen veggies, and that will also make it take longer for that water to get beautifully hot. Um, so going to put my water into my pot. I'm not going to use this pot. Even though it's a perfectly good size, I'm going to use a pot that actually has a wider base because that will help it boil faster, and I'm going to pop on the lid. So even though this pot is a perfectly reasonable size, I'm going fast. If I was going really fast, what I would do is I'd probably put half of the water in my pot and half of the water in my kettle, approximately, right? We're not baking, we're just cooking. So that makes it a little bit easier for us. And because my chicken is so puny, I'm not actually going to use the full 4 cups of water. This chicken is just a little on the small side. So we're going to already, I wish I had my sink. Um, we're going to just pop it on the stove for our purposes today. Another nice thing about using the wider pot is I have some pretty big burners on my stove. If I use my medium-sized pot, the heat can actually go around. And so if I use my wider pot, the heat goes up into the pot, which helps it boil faster rather than the heat going around. So bigger burner, not always better. And we're also putting on the lid, help trap that heat and make it work for us. All right, so while that is starting, I can season the broth and get all those flavors going together as well. Put on the lid just for fun there, because we're going to talk through a little bit about seasoning the broth. So if you were using a broth like a bone broth or, a carton of broth, you would dump that in. Might already be plenty seasoned for you. I'm going to use a bouillon. This happens to be a vegetable better than bouillon, but you could certainly use whatever. And the instructions are just to use a teaspoon for every 8 ounces of water. I have about 3 cups, so 3 of those 8-ounce batches of water in there. I'm going to use about 2 teaspoons though, because I also really like miso, and that is also salty. Because the rotisserie chicken is salty, and because um, you know, this is the bouillon and the miso are salty. We want to be just a little bit careful. This is my miso. And then in addition to those salty bits, we're also going to add some other flavorful things. I have a rosemary rotisserie chicken, rosemary and garlic, I think it was. And I'm going to add a little bit of dried thyme, crushed rosemary, just because I like those flavors. But I'm not going to use like a poultry kind of a seasoning salt because that would be even saltier and we don't want to go overboard. If I was adding pasta or potato, I might have a little bit of wiggle room, but I really like bread. So I'll be having this chicken soup with bread. And so I'm not adding those other things that would sort of absorb some of the salt. And I'm also going to throw in some dried mushrooms just because I love those. So when you're making this recipe, I certainly want you to tailor it to your taste, right? Make it a good thing, not a chore. Hopefully it's already coming across that this is super customizable. We're going to get a good base, and then we do whatever we want to the base to make it a good thing. So water is already heating. Let's take off the lid and doctor it up a little bit here. I am using a little baby spatula because I'm kind of getting down to the end of my bouillon. And I've been cooking quite a while, so I can eyeball things. If you are not in that boat, certainly you can measure so that you don't get into this pickle of a situation of I overdid it and I can't undo it, or just round down, put in a little bit, and then taste it. So another tip for the dried items is, and it can just make it faster or less to clean up afterwards if you don't have to measure everything. I could take half of a teaspoon of my thyme, just sort of pour it into my palm here and see, okay, how tall is that? How wide is that? Um, Dump that in. And then after you do that a couple of times, you can actually sort of eyeball it into the palm of your hand. It's not going to be a perfect half teaspoon, but it'll be pretty good and it'll taste pretty good. And that's what we're really after. It's not necessarily perfection, but something that's good. So then I'm just going to drop in my miso as a little bonus flavor for myself. I find that it's so brings such a lovely savoriness. I'm really obsessed with it. I also just like a sprinkle um, of turmeric usually in mine. So love that. And I should really sprinkle it into my hand because sometimes a gigantic chunk will come out. And that's not necessarily a nice surprise. Too much turmeric is rather bitter. And then the last thing that's going into my broth is about a tablespoon of my dried mushrooms, just because I like them, right? You don't need to put in dried mushrooms. Um, can you tell that I go through these a lot? Certainly have them as a pantry staple. Um, and now we'll just pop the lid back on. Oh, wait, first, we could taste it now before it's crazy hot, or we can taste it later. Either way, though, whatever you decide to do, if you find that it is already too salty, you have an opportunity to add a potato to reduce the salt or add a little bit of an acid like lemon juice or whatever to reduce the way that saltiness hits the palate. Um, that is a good hack for pork planning. And I've been there many times. So now we're going to part up our chicken. I'm going to pull the skin off because that will get kind of slimy in the stew. Now, I don't know how well you can see my hands here, but I'm literally just sort of pulling off skin to start off with. I pulled off a wing as well. Not the whole thing, but just a bit of it. This wing, and when you're parting up your chicken, feel free to just get in there and see where the joints articulate because that is where they will come off. So I'm just going to pull it off, and I got the whole wing on this one just by sort of taking it by the arm and pulling up where it would be like a shoulder, basically. Now with these little bits, I could save them like the really little bits. This I'd probably save for like a stock, unless I was hungry, and then I could nibble on it right now. Um, And then if you are going to make a stock, you can sort of choose how many bits you're going to contribute for that. I'm going to use the little like chicken wings in this soup, but choose your own adventure. Sometimes it's nice to have some snacking rotisserie chicken as well as some in your soup. Oh my goodness, we're already boiling. Well done, pot. See, the magic of using the big burner and starting at first. And then I'm just quickly pulling off the rest of the chicken. So with the breast, you've got some big chunks that come off relatively quickly and easily here. Um, I'm going to cut them into relatively large chunks, but you can cut them into whatever size chunks that you would like. And of course, this is already cooked, so we don't want it to be in there too crazy long. We just want it in there long enough to really get warm and lovely and add a little bit of flavor to the soup. Chopping. Nice. And we could do the same with the legs as well. Just sort of pulling off the skin, finding where the joints articulate and move, and then breaking them up into manageable pieces and pulling the meat straight off. If you have family members who are hungry and waiting for food, you could certainly have them help you with this part because it can take a minute. And if they get in a few bites of chicken, it's just sort of a win for everybody, right? Now, knowing full well that I'm putting in frozen vegetables and they're going to need a little bit of time to come up to speed, I'm actually going to dump those in right now. I really like peas and carrots and green beans in mine to go with everything else. Um, so I'm going to add about a cup of each of those. And it definitely doesn't need to be perfect. If it's not perfect, you could totally adjust or adjust next time, right? It's really whatever makes you happy. Oh, got a lovely cup there and a lovely cup of the green beans over there. Now it's a good thing that I added them now because now the water has all stopped boiling, needs a little bit of time to come back up to temperature. The speed's not really that relevant. And then as a little treat for myself, I have some pearl onions. So bear in mind, different frozen vegetables could be more or less expensive. If cost is a factor for you, definitely take that into consideration. These are not the cheapest of the frozen vegetables, but they're delicious. And if I make my food feel like a treat, then I love it that much more. And it's, just fantastic. My whole family likes these. Um, and then we're just going to dump in our chicken. So now all we really need to do is let everything come back up to temperature. Um, all the flavors get together. Maybe I cut my slice of bread. Um, and maybe I have one chicken leg that I forgot to do. Maybe I dump that in while I'm waiting for the rest of this to come up to temperature. Hopefully, this is a helpful demonstration on a way that you can just sort of get a good base going, add, some veggies and some protein to it. Doesn't need to be a rotisserie chicken. It could be any cooked meat that you already have kicking around that you would like to put into a soup, and go from there. Thanks for joining us. I am going to drop a link to our survey into the chat because this is my first time doing one of these and I would love to make them better in the future. So please, if you do have time, give us your feedback. Thanks, everybody.